Welcome to a series called He Trains My Hands for War, where we're going through the book of Joshua, verse by verse, because it's by far the best example that there is on what it is to be in the army of the Lord and follow his directions and see what it is to have success because of his directions and see what it's like to have failure because you didn't obey those directions. It's an important lesson that we learn, especially before we get to the warring of the saints, between the saints and the antichrist. Now, I also want to add that I recommend you work out during this time. If you're going through this series with me, it's going to take years to get through it. I recommend you work out during this time. Now, where we are in this is they had just defeated AI, and now they're going to kind of deal with the king and AI, and we see the good and the bad consequences on what it was that was achieved in AI. Joshua 8, starting verse 23. But the king of Ai they took alive and brought him to Joshua. And it came to pass, when Israel had made an end of slaying all the inhabitants of Ai in the field and the wilderness where they pursued them, and when they had all fallen by the edge of the sword until they were consumed, that all the Israelites returned to Ai and struck it with the edge of the sword. So it was that all who fell that day, both men and women, were 12,000, all the people of Ai. For Joshua did not draw back his hand with which he stretched out the spear until he had utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of Ai. Only the livestock and the spoil of that city Israel took as booty for themselves, according to the word of the Lord, which he had commanded Joshua. So Joshua burned Ai and made it a heap forever, a desolation to this day. And the king of Ai he hanged on a tree until evening, and as soon as the sun was down, Joshua commanded that he should take the corpse down from the tree, cast it at the entrance of the gate of the city, raise over it a great heap of stones that remains to this day. Now Joshua built an altar to the Lord God of Israel on Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the children of Israel, as it is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of whole stones over which no man has wielded an iron tool. And they offered on it burnt offerings to the Lord and sacrificed peace offerings. Now, this is very fascinating because not only had he followed God's directions exactly, but he also followed the directions that Moses gave him back in Deuteronomy, which God gave him. So it's really kind of, he's being extremely obedient in this moment. Literally left no one alive, which was God's instructions. He did the exact battle plan that God instructed. He did everything that God had instructed, but he remembered when Moses was alive that he said this in Deuteronomy 27, starting verse 4. Therefore it shall be, when you have crossed over the Jordan, that on Mount Ebal you shall set up these stones which I commanded you today, and you shall whitewash them with lime. And there you shall build an altar to the Lord your God, an altar of stones. You shall not use an iron tool on them. You shall build with whole stones the altar of the Lord your God, and offer burnt offerings on it to the Lord your God. You shall offer peace offerings, and shall eat there and rejoice before the Lord God. And you shall write very plainly on the stones all the words of this law. So ultimately what you have here is you have Joshua, following these pretty, interesting battle plans of God. Cleaning it all up, like God said, destroy everybody. Because keep in mind, they are purifying. It's not to be brutal, it's to purify the land. Because that is the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that God promised the Israelites. It is the land flowing with milk and honey. It is the land. So, it's that place. It has to be purified according to God. Not because Israelites are necessarily special, but there's the bloodline that will bring about Jesus Christ. Now what we see is immediately following that, Joshua is following the orders of Moses, which is essentially to now, once this is done, go to Mount Ebal and make this altar of the Lord. Because it really was they didn't do it first thing, of course. They followed God's directions every single step of the way, but once they got to Mount Ebal, that is when Joshua thought, yeah, this is the good time to do that. So there you go. I do want to take a moment, just really put into your heart, really a place of obedience to God when he's trying to give you direction, when he's trying to help you find your path, when he's trying to help you, guide your way through spiritual warfare, through literal warfare, through whatever it is, he's going to ask you to do some things. And we not only need to do the things in the moment that he asks us to do, but we have to remember the things that we agreed to a long time ago. We've all made covenants with God over the years, times of maybe despair, God, if you do this for me, I'll do this thing for you. Or God, I see this vision that you've given in my head of doing this thing, so I'll do it, and then we don't do it. We have to remember the things of old in our lives that we agreed. If there's a promise that you made to God 20 years ago, he's waiting on that to be fulfilled. So it's important that as men and women of God, as sons and daughters of God, that we be obedient to the things he says to do, and we do the things that we agree to do, regardless of how much time has or has not passed. That's a critically important piece of all of this. So there you go. Stay with us. We're going to just keep digging. Again, I recommend you work out while you're going through this process. I'm just out here. It's Lake Jacomo. It's a trail up there. Really beautiful place if you've ever been out here. I love walking out here. I used to come out here as a kid. But anyhow, any thoughts or insight, definitely put that below.